Mark and Lisa had been searching for their dream home for months. When they stumbled upon the charming old house on Elm Street, they knew it was the one. The house had character, a beautiful garden, and a surprisingly affordable price. It was a Victorian-era structure with intricate woodwork, a wraparound porch, and large bay windows that filled the rooms with light. The previous owners had restored much of the original detail, giving it a quaint yet elegant charm. On moving day, the couple was filled with excitement and a sense of accomplishment. They spent the morning unpacking and arranging their belongings, each room slowly transforming into a reflection of their tastes and personality. As the afternoon sun began to set, casting long shadows across the lawn, they decided to explore the house more thoroughly. While Mark set up the kitchen, Lisa ventured into the attic, hoping to find some additional storage space. The attic was dimly lit and dusty, with cobwebs hanging from the rafters. As she moved some old furniture around, she noticed a small, unassuming wooden box tucked away in a corner. It was covered in a thick layer of dust, and the latch was rusted. Curiosity piqued, she brought it downstairs. The box was surprisingly heavy, and as Lisa placed it on the dining room table, she called Mark over. Together they opened it, revealing a collection of children's toys, clothes, and books, all neatly packed. There was a doll with glass eyes, a small wooden train, a collection of marbles, and several picture books with worn covers. Beneath the toys, they found a stack of yellowed papers and a faded photograph of a little girl. Her name, Emily, was written on the back of the photo in delicate handwriting. The girl in the photograph had a sweet, innocent face framed by curly hair, and she was smiling brightly, clutching the doll that now lay in the box. Mark and Lisa exchanged puzzled glances. There was something both heartwarming and unsettling about the discovery. The photograph seemed to speak of a time long past, a life that had once filled the house with laughter and joy. As they continued to sift through the box, they found more personal items: a small locket with a picture of Emily inside, a hairbrush with strands of fine hair still caught in the bristles, and a few pieces of children's artwork. Each item seemed to tell a story, a glimpse into the life of a child who had once lived there. They decided to leave the box on the table, intending to revisit it later. For now, there were more pressing tasks to complete. As night fell, they finished unpacking and settled into their new home, exhausted but happy. They toasted to new beginnings, unaware that the past they had unearthed would soon intertwine with their future in ways they could never have imagined. That night, as they lay in bed, Lisa couldn't shake the image of Emily's smiling face from her mind. She wondered what had happened to the little girl and why her belongings had been left behind. Mark, sensing her unease, assured her that they would look into the house's history once they were more settled. The house creaked and groaned in the night, the sounds of an old structure adjusting to its new occupants. As they drifted off to sleep, they felt a strange mix of excitement and trepidation, their dreams filled with visions of the past and shadows of things to come. The next morning, the couple's curiosity about Emily's past was impossible to ignore. After breakfast, Mark suggested they visit the local library to see if they could find any records about the house and its previous occupants. Lisa agreed, eager to uncover the mystery behind the forgotten child. The library was a short drive away, a quaint building filled with the scent of old books and polished wood. They headed to the archives section, where they were greeted by Mrs. Turner, the librarian. She was an elderly woman with a kind smile and a wealth of knowledge about the town's history. When Mark and Lisa explained their discovery, Mrs. Turner's expression turned somber. "That house on Elm Street has a long history," she said, leading them to a section of old newspapers and public records. "Many families have lived there over the years. It's possible you might find something about Emily here." The couple spent hours sifting through dusty records and yellowed newspapers. As they delved deeper into the past, they began to piece together the story of the house. It had been built in the late 1800s by a wealthy merchant and had changed hands many times since then. The house had seen weddings, births, and funerals, each family leaving behind a part of their history. Their breakthrough came when Lisa found an old newspaper clipping from the 1950s. The headline read, "Tragic Accident Claims Young Life." The article detailed how a little girl named Emily had died in a fire that had broken out in the house. According to the report, Emily had been playing in her room when the fire started. Despite the efforts of her parents and the fire department, she had been trapped and unable to escape. The fire had been devastating, reducing much of the upper floor to ashes. Emily's parents had moved away shortly after the tragedy, leaving the house vacant for several years. The discovery left Mark and Lisa shaken. They had found the girl's toys and belongings because they had survived the fire, a poignant reminder of the life that had been cut short. They couldn't help but feel a deep sadness for the young girl and her family. Determined to learn more, they continued their research. They found census records, old photographs, and property deeds, all of which painted a picture of the house's history. They learned that after the fire, the house had been renovated and sold to new owners who had added modern amenities while preserving much of the original charm. As the days passed, strange things began to happen around the house. Objects would move on their own, doors would creak open, and they would hear faint, inexplicable sounds. One evening, as Lisa was reading in the living room, she felt a sudden chill. Looking up, she saw the faint outline of a child standing at the top of the stairs. It was only for a moment, but it was enough to send shivers down her spine. When she blinked, the figure was gone. Mark was skeptical at first, attributing the occurrences to the house's old age and their overactive imaginations. But soon, even he couldn't deny that something was amiss. One night, he heard the unmistakable sound of a music box playing a lullaby, a melody that seemed to come from nowhere. Following the sound, he was led to the attic, where he found the music box from Emily's belongings, softly playing on its own. Their unease grew as the paranormal activity intensified. Mark and Lisa decided to hold a small memorial for Emily, hoping to bring some peace to her restless spirit. They placed flowers and her favorite toys from the box in a corner of the attic, saying a few words to honor her memory. For a while, it seemed to work. The house was quiet, and they felt a sense of calm return. However, the calm was short-lived. A few nights later, they both woke up to the sound of a child crying. The cries were heart-wrenching, echoing through the halls. Mark and Lisa followed the sound to Emily's old room, where they found the room eerily cold, and the toys they had placed in the attic now scattered on the floor. It was clear that Emily's spirit was still in turmoil, and their efforts to bring her peace had only temporarily quelled the unrest. The couple knew they needed to understand more about Emily's life and death to truly help her. They decided to reach out to the town's historical society, hoping to find someone who might have more information. As they delved deeper into the mystery, they couldn't shake the feeling that the past was beginning to consume them, blurring the line between the living and the dead. As the days turned into weeks, the atmosphere in the house grew increasingly oppressive. Mark and Lisa found themselves trapped in a cycle of sleepless nights and escalating fear. The haunting, which had started as subtle and sporadic, had become relentless and terrifying. The disturbances became more physical and intrusive. One night, as Mark was brushing his teeth, he glanced up into the bathroom mirror and saw a child's handprint slowly appear on the foggy glass. His heart raced as he wiped it away, only to see it reappear moments later. He backed out of the bathroom, unable to tear his eyes away from the mirror, and stumbled into the hallway where Lisa was standing, equally shaken. Lisa had her own encounters. She often felt a cold breath on her neck while she cooked, as if someone was standing right behind her. One afternoon, as she was folding laundry, the lights began to flicker, and she saw Emily's small, ghostly figure out of the corner of her eye, standing silently in the doorway. When she turned to face it, the figure was gone, leaving behind an overwhelming sense of sorrow and despair. The couple's mental and emotional states deteriorated rapidly. They tried to go about their daily routines, but the constant supernatural activity made it impossible to feel safe or sane. They decided to invite a paranormal investigator to help them understand what was happening and to see if they could find a way to end the haunting. The investigator, a woman named Dr. Evelyn Carter, arrived with a team and equipment designed to detect and communicate with spirits. She set up cameras, audio recorders, and electromagnetic field detectors throughout the house. As night fell, the team gathered in the living room, reviewing the history of the house and the tragic events surrounding Emily's death. Dr. Carter explained that the intense activity suggested a spirit in great distress, one that had not moved on due to unresolved issues or trauma. She suggested conducting a seance to try to communicate with Emily directly and understand what she wanted. Mark and Lisa, desperate for answers and a resolution, reluctantly agreed. The seance was a tense affair. The team sat around a table, holding hands, while Dr. Carter began to speak in a calm, soothing voice, calling out to Emily. The temperature in the room dropped noticeably, and a chill settled over them. The candles flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. As Dr. Carter continued, the room was filled with a sudden, intense burst of static from the radios and televisions. The table shook, and a child's voice, faint and sorrowful, echoed through the room. The voice was unmistakably Emily's, and it repeated a single word: "Remember." Tears streamed down Lisa's face as she listened to the heartbreaking plea. Dr. Carter asked Emily what she wanted them to remember, but the only response was a series of painful, gut-wrenching sobs that reverberated through the house. The seance ended abruptly when one of the cameras toppled over, smashing to the ground, and the room was plunged into silence. Reviewing the footage later, the team found that the audio recorders had captured more than just the seance. Among the static and white noise were snippets of Emily's voice, as well as other darker sounds that suggested a presence even more malevolent. It became clear that Emily's spirit was not the only one trapped in the house. Dr. Carter concluded that the house was a nexus of negative energy, possibly due to the numerous tragedies and upheavals it had witnessed over the decades. Emily's spirit, in particular, was bound by the pain of her untimely death and the sense of being forgotten. The investigator suggested that the couple perform a formal exorcism or cleansing ritual to try to release the spirits. Despite their fear, Mark and Lisa decided to go ahead with the ritual. Dr. Carter and her team prepared the house, setting up protective barriers and gathering the necessary materials. On the night of the cleansing, the air was thick with tension. As Dr. Carter began the ritual, the house seemed to come alive with a fury. Objects flew off shelves, doors slammed, and an oppressive darkness filled the rooms. Mark and Lisa clung to each other, desperately hoping that this would bring an end to their torment. As the ritual reached its climax, a deafening silence fell over the house. For a moment, it seemed as if the spirits had been appeased. But then, the silence was shattered by a blood-curdling scream that echoed from the attic. The air grew frigid, and an unseen force knocked Dr. Carter to the ground, her equipment sparking and failing. The couple ran upstairs where they found the attic door wide open. Inside, the temperature was icy, and in the center of the room, Emily's ghost stood, her expression a mixture of sorrow and rage. The air was thick with a sense of injustice and unresolved pain. The ritual had only angered the spirits further, and it became clear that the house was now more dangerous than ever. The failure of the cleansing ritual left Mark and Lisa more vulnerable than ever. Their once quiet home had become a battleground of unseen forces, and they were caught in the crossfire. Desperation drove them to contact a renowned spiritual medium, known for her ability to connect with tormented souls and guide them to peace. Her name was Madame Celine, a stoic woman with a mysterious aura. Madame Celine arrived with an air of confidence, her presence alone bringing a sliver of hope to the beleaguered couple. She listened intently as they recounted their experiences, her expression remaining unreadable. After a thorough examination of the house, she determined that the spirit of Emily was not the only entity present. There was a darker force at play, one that fed on fear and despair. That night, Madame Celine prepared for a final confrontation. She warned Mark and Lisa that this would be dangerous, but it was their last hope to free the spirits and reclaim their home. She set up a protective circle in the living room, adorned with symbols and artifacts designed to ward off evil. Mark and Lisa stood within the circle, holding hands, their hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation. The séance began with Madame Celine chanting ancient incantations, her voice steady and strong. The air grew heavy, and the temperature plummeted. Suddenly, the room was filled with a cacophony of whispers and cries, the voices of countless spirits trapped within the house's walls. The protective circle flickered with an ethereal light, casting eerie shadows around the room. Emily's ghost appeared before them, her face a mask of anguish. She reached out towards them, her eyes pleading for help. Madame Celine extended her hand, trying to establish a connection with the tormented child. Just as it seemed Emily might finally find peace, the room was plunged into darkness, and a chilling laugh echoed from the shadows. The darker entity revealed itself, a shadowy figure with eyes that burned like embers. It moved with an unnatural grace, exuding malevolence. The force of its presence shattered the protective circle, throwing Madame Celine, Mark, and Lisa to the ground. The entity lunged towards Emily, who screamed in terror and vanished into the void. The spirit medium struggled to her feet, her resolve unbroken. She resumed her chants, calling upon the ancient powers to banish the dark force. The entity retaliated with a wave of energy that knocked Madame Celine back, leaving her dazed and bleeding. Mark and Lisa, now defenseless, were at the mercy of the malevolent spirit. In a final act of defiance, Madame Selene mustered the last of her strength. She drew a symbol of banishment in the air, her voice rising to a crescendo. The dark entity shrieked, its form dissipating into wisps of smoke. The room fell silent, the oppressive atmosphere lifting slightly. But the victory was short-lived. Mark and Lisa stumbled towards Madame Selene, who lay unconscious and severely injured. Before they could reach her, the temperature dropped again, and an overwhelming sense of dread filled the air. They turned to see Emily's ghost reappear, but this time her expression was different. She seemed to be pleading, warning them of something. The realization struck them too late. The dark entity had not been banished. It had merely retreated, biding its time. The shadows in the room deepened, and the malevolent force re-emerged with renewed fury. It engulfed Mark and Lisa, their screams echoing through the house. Their bodies convulsed as the entity drained their life force, leaving them pale and lifeless on the floor. Madame Selene awoke to a horrific scene. She crawled towards the couple, but it was too late. Their spirits were trapped, their faces frozen in expressions of terror and pain. The dark entity had claimed them, and their presence began to fade, just as Emily's had. In the days that followed, the house remained eerily quiet. Neighbors noticed the couple's absence, but no one dared to investigate. Eventually, the house was abandoned, its windows boarded up, and its dark history forgotten by the community. Mark and Lisa's family, ostracized and grief-stricken, struggled to cope with the inexplicable loss. Years later, rumors began to circulate about the old house on the corner, the one where lights flickered at odd hours and strange noises could be heard at night. It became a place of whispered tales and fearful glances, a monument to the forgotten souls who had once lived there, and the malevolent force that still lingered within its walls. The tragic end of Mark and Lisa served as a grim reminder of the power of unresolved pain and the darkness that can lurk within even the most innocent of places. Their story, like Emily's, was destined to be forgotten, a haunting echo in the annals of the house's history.